So if you're familiar at all with Elder Scrolls, you know that every single protagonist has a title of sorts. Skyrim's is obviously the Dragonborn, Oblivion has the Hero of Kvatch, Morrowind has the Nerevarine, Elder Scrolls Arena, that's the first one, has the Eternal Champion, but that protagonist also maybe has a canon name. What's important is that Daggerfall's protagonist is the Agent. The name seems to come from the lore book, The Warp in the West, which describes reports from Blade's agents in Daggerfall around when the game's conclusion occurs. I think that this is extremely interesting. Both Morrowind and Oblivion have pre-constructed classes named Agent, but the class isn't actually available in Daggerfall itself. So what? Why should I care, you ask? It means that the Agent potentially points to a canon build for the player character. This video is partially spurred on by the idea that Daggerfall's story is boring, and I simply can't agree on that matter. To be totally fair, I do think that it's one of the hardest stories to piece together when playing normally, because it's given to you in short lore dumps between hours of dungeoning. Personally, I think it's one of the most interesting stories in Elder Scrolls. Because I plan to focus heavily on the game's story as it's presented to the player, I thought it would be fitting to try and make a build fitting for the Agent. I decided to try and concoct the build based on two things. First, we're gonna try to build it like a base class from Daggerfall itself. Second, we're going to do our best to faithfully translate the Morrowind and Oblivion classes into Daggerfall. This is because the skills are, predictably, inconsistent across the games. Morrowind, for example, doesn't have language skills or climbing. Oblivion lost spears and medium armor. Skyrim dropped mysticism as a magical school, you know how it is. So, first things first. What even is an agent? Morrowind's description reads as follows. Agents are operatives skilled in deception and avoidance, but trained in self-defense and the use of deadly force. Self-reliant and independent, agents devote themselves to personal goals or to various patrons or causes. Makes agents sound pretty cool. Oblivion's is much simpler. Charming when they can be seen, and nearly invisible when in shadow. Neat, so we have some flavor to go off of. The first thing I did was look for similar classes in Daggerfall. There's quite a few, but a few standouts to me were the Bard, Nightblade, and Rogue. These three classes are the ones that are most similar to the ideas presented in the Agent class. The personality and likability of a Bard, stealth focus with supporting magic of a Nightblade, and the combat training of a Rogue. Alright, now how do we synthesize this with what's presented later on? Both Oblivion and Morrowind say agents specialize in stealth while favoring the attributes of personality and agility. I think this makes it easy for us to mess with our attribute distribution first thing. If we're going to be building this like a base class, then I think it's important we understand exactly what that means for our constraints. Instead of our attributes being anywhere from 10 to 75, as I often do when min-maxing a custom class, we're going to be much more constrained, staying between 40 and 60. This is where the majority of skills lie for the base classes. Arguably, you could increase this range somewhat, but I figured I would stay conservative to make absolutely certain I wasn't abusing the system. I increased our agility and personality to the detriment of our willpower, endurance, and luck. The exact distribution is arguable, but I think this is a pretty good guess. Great, so we have our stat distribution. What kind of skills are we going to be rocking this playthrough? Let's look at the skills the classes start with in Morrowind and Oblivion. In Morrowind, we're given Speechcraft, Sneak, Acrobatics, Light Armor, and Shortblade as majors, and Mercantile, Conjuration, Block, Unarmored, and Illusion as minors. In Oblivion, we're given Acrobatics, Illusion, Marksman, Mercantile, Security, Sneak, and Speechcraft. Now, predictably, we don't have access to all of these skills in Daggerfall. Armor skills aren't really a thing, and Speechcraft is spread across a few different skills. That said, we know our primary skill is going to be Stealth. Stealth is the agent's main draw thematically. After this, I decided that jumping would make the most sense. Oblivion and Morrowind both include acrobatics as a main feature of the agent class, so I used the closest analog that we had in Daggerfall. The third primary skill is actually rather difficult to decide on, but I eventually decided to choose Shortblade, essentially because Morrowind listed the same skill as a major, and I gave it seniority over Oblivion. That said, I chose Archery for our first major skill, and immediately followed it up with Illusion. Illusion is shared by both subsequent games as the agent's magical school of choice. I followed this up with Mercantile. It's a major skill in both Oblivion and Morrowind, so I figured it should be somewhere up here. That then brings us to our minor skills. I chose both Etiquette and Streetwise, since Speechcraft isn't one unified skill in Daggerfall. Going through and choosing every single language didn't feel like it made much sense. The agent is charismatic, but not necessarily a linguist. In addition to this, I chose lockpicking because of Oblivion's security skill. After this, I chose dodging. As mentioned, there aren't any armor skills in Daggerfall, but every time you get hit, you train your dodging skill just a little bit. It's the closest thing we have to an armor skill, so I used it as a minor. Next is mysticism. Now, if any of these is maybe a little bit copy, it's this one. My primary reason for claiming its thematic is twofold. Number one, mysticism has the open spell in Daggerfall, which is useful for an expert in infiltration like the agent. Number two is because Morrowind's conjuration allows you to create bound weapons. Mysticism, meanwhile, has a create item spell. Finally, it is because of mark and recall. If you're familiar with Morrowind, you already know this spell, but for the uninitiated, this spell allows you to set a location with its first cast and teleport you to that location on the second. This makes escaping Daggerfall's massive dungeons a breeze, as you can mark the entrance, dungeon dive to your heart's content, and then return to stuff your cart. Alternatively, you can return to your quest giver's location instantly, allowing for quick quest turnarounds. Finally is Thaumaturgy. Morrowind, Oblivion, and Skyrim all have charm effects under the school of illusion. In Daggerfall, however, that effect is under Thaumaturgy. I gave Thaumaturgy the edge over climbing because Thaumaturgy also has levitation, which does climbing's job better. Better luck next time, I guess. Alright, that's our skills out of the way. How about special advantages and disadvantages? If you've watched me add really terrible disadvantages and seen that the dagger goes towards easier and wondered why that is, let me explain. The dagger shows the leveling speed of your skills. Easy means fast, and difficult means slow. The multiplier you see here shows approximately how much easier or harder it is to level your skills. It goes from 0.3 to 3.0. Say you want to level your axe skill. If you need to hit an enemy 10 times in order to level your axe skill, then if your class is down here at 0.3, you'd actually only need 3 hits before resting. If it was up at the other end, however, you'd need to hit an enemy 30 times. What it doesn't affect is the number of skill increases you need to level up. You still need 15 skill increases in order to gain a character level. If you're a regular viewer, you already understand that your overall character level only takes into account 6 specific skills. Say it with me: your 3 primary skills, your 2 highest level major skills, and your highest level minor skill. You're probably sick of hearing me say that by now, but it's one of those quirks of Daggerfall that isn't immediately apparent if you've only gone as far back as Morrowind. Now remember, we're trying to make this kind of like a default class, so we'd ideally like to be at the average leveling speed. A little high or low is fine, but nothing super exploitative. The dagger's position is affected by our advantages and disadvantages, as well as our maximum hit points per level. Following the Nightblade, I chose Magery 1.5x. Then I chose Expertise in Shortblade and Missile weapons as advantages. This gives us more damage and chance to hit with our weapons of choice. In order to balance this out again, and in an attempt to force the light armor that we're proficient with in later games, I gave us forbidden armor types Plate and Chain, as well as forbidden shield type Tower Shield. With this, we sit at exactly average leveling speed. I didn't mess with our hit points per level at all. Most classes seem to bottom out at 8, save for the Sorcerer and the Mage, who get down to 6. And that's our class. Now, obviously, I have no idea if Bethesda even considered backporting classes when they created the agent class for Morrowind, but I think that this is a fairly good representation of what it might have looked like. If there's any disagreement, I'm happy to hear what it is and why. But in any case, we're going to move on and see how the agent tackles the challenges ahead. For the career quiz, I considered generating it randomly, but then I realized it'd be a pain to summarize what I got, so here you go. But also hold it! This question is asked of you no matter what your class is. I want you to take a quick look at this list of gods. There's someone missing. If you can remember who it is and why they're not on this list without cheating, you can have a gold star. We do our final stat roll, aiming for high agility, and then we begin our journey. I want this video to act as a summary of events for the game's story for those who are interested, so I'm going to be keeping the game's few cutscenes intact and mostly unedited in this playthrough. I will show a timestamp in the bottom right if you'd rather skip them. If you're unfamiliar with Daggerfall, I recommend at least watching the first one through because I plan to discuss the events within after the fact.
400 years after Septim's reign, the beginning will meet the end, and the bloody circle will close in the Empire of Tamriel. The unworthy heirs of the Septim dynasty have allowed the bonds of the Empire to weaken and crack. Uriel Septim the Seventh cannot repair what his ancestors ignored. The provinces fight among themselves like neglected children, drunk with rebellion, and one indomitable power hides itself, but not forever.
Excuse the gloom, but none may know of this meeting. The nature of my trouble is darker still. Over a year ago, King Lysandis of Daggerfall died honorably on the field of battle. He was as loyal a subject, ally, and friend as you are. I did grieve for him, but his spirit does not rest. With a spectral army, he haunts his former kingdom, crying for revenge. I do not know why a good and loyal man would be so cursed. Perhaps you can find the answer and close the marble jaws of oblivion, bringing peace to his soul. I ask this as your emperor and your friend. I have one lesser request. Several years ago, I wrote a letter to the Queen of Daggerfall. It never arrived. The letter was of a sentimental and personal nature. If you find and destroy that letter, I will be grateful. Now, my champion, rest well this night, for tomorrow you sail for the kingdom of Daggerfall.
And with that, we crash onto the shores of Daggerfall, ending up in Privateer's Hold. There's not much that's story relevant here, except for explaining that the storm was of supernatural strength that destroyed our boat. Alright, so we're given the first little bit of background about the world. The bonds of the Empire are weak, and Uriel Septim VII isn't going to be able to repair those bonds. So that means that now there's civil war. This civil war has led to the death of one King Lysandis, who now haunts the realm. We are told that one indomitable power hides itself, but not forever, which presumably we are going to see later on. The secret meeting with the Emperor is actually much more interesting than it first appears. Almost everything he tells us, well, you'll see. I'll be bringing it up again. It's not too difficult for the agent to escape the cave. The ebony dagger is extremely powerful and does a lot of work in this early dungeon. In case you're unaware, ebony is the third best material in Daggerfall. It is only surpassed by Orcish and Daedric. The main reason that this matters is because of how material affects your chance to hit enemies. Each level of material gives approximately 10% more chance to hit. The actual math is a little bit more complicated, but it's a pretty massive improvement. Take a look at this chart. This ebony dagger is offering us a plus 40 to hit. It's amazing. We're not going to be replacing this weapon until pretty much right before the final dungeon of the game. In fact, after leaving this first dungeon and acquiring a set of leather armor, we're pretty much going to be wearing our endgame fit. You see, in Daggerfall, When you forbid the use of plate armor, that means you can't use iron, steel, elven, dwarven, mithril, adamantine, ebony, orcish, or daedric, and we've forbidden both plate and chain armor, meaning that leather is our only option. This sounds kind of rough, and it is, but it's also fairly normal. Most of the default thief-style classes aren't able to wear anything other than leather. But let's pick up our story again, shall we? Eventually, the agent reaches level 2, after which a letter is sent to him. Lady Magnuson is the Emperor's agent in the court of Daggerfall, and the only people who know that are other agents of the Emperor. She wants to discuss our mission, and since we're both loyal to the Emperor, we're going to take her up on that. We meet up with her, and she gives us the skinny. Lysandis is haunting the streets of Daggerfall at night, and the only coherent word he says is vengeance. Going outside while Lysandis is around means you'll probably get attacked by Ghost. Therefore, she suggests that we should investigate who wronged Lysandis so that we can try to put his spirit to rest. She suggests we investigate the 3 major powers of the Iliac Bay, these powers being the kingdoms of Sentinel, Wayrest, and Daggerfall. This is helpful information. Daggerfall we could have assumed was a major power, but since the Emperor didn't include a travel pamphlet about the Iliac Bay, it's not easy to tell which of these 41 regions actually matter at a glance. She also tells us a bit about the letter that the Emperor mentioned. Apparently, the guy who was supposed to deliver it hired a courier to do it in his stead because of the war. Of course, we have no idea who that is or where they might be, but it at least means that there must be someone out there who knows something. After this, she tells us not to mention her name, and that she's compromised, so she's leaving Daggerfall soon. With that, it's up to us to figure out how to proceed with our investigation. I decided to take on one of the random quests that you can get from nobles, but specifically wanted to get one from Baron Zaya so that I could lay the groundwork for a quest we'll be getting at level 9. This one just had us enter a dungeon and kill an orc shaman. This quest gives us enough experience to get up to level 3, opening up the next story quests. First up, we get a letter from Morgaia, and this is the first thing that should set off alarm bells. Morgaia is a princess of Wayrest, one of the 3 major powers. The fact that she sent a letter to us at all means that she's got some vested interest in our presence here. What exactly could that be? She already knows that we want to know what happened to the Emperor's letter, but how would a princess of Wayrest know anything about that? The letter was of a sentimental and personal nature. Regardless, we aren't afforded any other leads, so we might as well go visit her. Upon speaking to her, she tells us that there are very few scandals of which she is totally ignorant. This doesn't really tell us anything except that maybe the information in the Emperor's letter is somehow scandalous. Of course, if we want to learn anything else, we're going to have to do her a favor. In this case, that favor is simply to courier a message to a certain high-level sorcerer at the Necromancer's Crypt. She warns us about the people we're about to visit and informs us that she needs a response from the King of Worms. At this point, we don't really know who this is or why he's important, but with a title like King of Worms, we can surmise that he's likely the leader of the Necromancers and not some random schmuck. Without much in the way of options, we agree to deliver the message. Since we're being nosy, let's find out what this message says, shall we? She has agreed to give him her first in exchange for him exerting his influence on the King of Firsthold in Somerset Isle. If you played Arena, you might remember Firsthold being the northernmost city on Somerset Isle. Apparently, the king wishes to speak to his dead son. So desperate is he for this, that he would apparently marry somebody named Nulfaga in exchange for it. Don't worry, we'll get into her later. If you're confused by what she's referring to with her first, then don't worry. It's actually not clear what it's supposed to be. According to the Daggerfall Chronicles, it's not her firstborn. Though, I'm not gonna lie, that doesn't leave much else that she might be referring to. The response is 5 words total, including addressing the princess and all 3 words of his signature. Returning to Morgaia, she's absolutely thrilled, and is apparently going to be the Queen of Firsthold. Good for her. She shares what she knows about the letter as promised. Apparently, someone named Gortwog has it. He is the warlord of the orcs. He apparently bought it from the Thieves Guild, who had stolen it from Queen Aubk-i. This confirms that the letter was indeed delivered to the Queen of Daggerfall. Morgaya confesses to not knowing why the letter was sent to Aubk-i, saying, "The girl is innocent to a fault, and everyone knows that Gothrid is not the loyal Empire toady that Lysandis was." She trails off before changing the subject, telling us that we should speak with Minisera, the former Queen of Daggerfall. This gives the agent some direction in 3 new leads. First is Aubk-i and Gothrid, the current King and Queen of Daggerfall. Aubk-i, the supposed recipient of the letter, is sure to know something about it. Next is Gortwog, the warlord of the Orcs, who supposedly is the current holder of the letter. And next is Minisera, the former Queen of Daggerfall and Lysandis' widow. For now, that means we're heading back to Daggerfall. There are 2 potential leads there, and we aren't told where we can find Gortwog until a bit later. So we speak to Aubk-i, who has a quest for us. She apparently wants us to check on her husband's grandmother, Nulfaga. Nulfaga is apparently not doing too well. She's in frail health and apparently going mad. She's locked herself in her castle, and the queen wants to check in on her. Apparently her castle is a dangerous place. We of course oblige the queen because we want to be on her good side. And how dangerous could a castle that an old madwoman lives in be anyways? When we actually meet Nulfaga, she has one of 4 different things that she can say. All of them some variation of her expressing grief over her son Lysandis' death, and a hint to the door to her chamber. She speaks in riddles, and when I expressed confusion about this in my first Daggerfall video, many of you helpfully translated her lines into something more easily understandable. So thanks for that. In any case, speaking to Nulfaga is all we need to do to give Aubk-i a report on Grandma's health. So we're going to go back and do just that. Aubk-i seems to be happy to hear that Nulfaga isn't dead, so that's good. Now, it's important that we keep Nulfaga in mind for later. She's probably the single most affected person by Lysandis' death so far. Gothrid, his own son, doesn't so much as have a unique line of dialogue about his father's death. Still, Aubk-i is happy, and we're able to accept another quest from her. This one seems pretty important because even before we get to accept it, she swears us to secrecy on the matter. This quest concerns Minisera and letters. Aubk-i has noticed that the Dowager Queen has been paying for the upkeep of Castle Necromoghan, a place, she claims, that Minisera has disappeared to with a parcel of letters. She asks us to go to Castle Necromoghan and find those letters. She asks that we trust her because she can't actually prove that her suspicions are founded. Now, we know that the Emperor sent Aubk-i a letter, and that the letter was stolen by the Thieves Guild. It's possible that Aubk-i suspects that Minisera stole the letter, but there's no real proof of that at the moment. In any case, we know that the current queen distrusts her mother-in-law enough to send a mercenary to her secret fort to investigate her goings-on, so it's off to Castle Necromoghan for us. Necromoghan is one of those places that I rag on because it's a castle, but is presented as a hole in the ground. I get that it's supposed to be a secret base, but surely it could have been a little more grandiose than this. Still, complaints aside, the information the quest offers us is pretty interesting. As mentioned, we already know it's not going to enlighten us on the whereabouts of the Emperor's letter, but it may shed some light on who exactly the people of the court of Daggerfall are, and we do get some answers in that regard. Eventually, we find a stack of letters that has been badly burnt, presumably in a bid to get rid of them. In them, we can read some rather interesting, though incomplete, pages. First, we learn that King Lysandis was an adulterer, seemingly with a woman named Medora. Keep her in mind, she's going to be important. Daggerfall has a, let's call it, troubled history with the Orcs. In this historical account, we read that Prince Claius, Minisera's father, is responsible for war crimes against the Orcs. The Orcs who could speak Cyrodiilic pleaded and begged for mercy for the children, to no avail. The men apparently made sport of killing the Orc children. The 5th and final page is also quite interesting. It seems as though Lysandis had some kind of plan to abandon the crown. Upon bringing these documents to Aubk-i, she confirms that apparently everyone knows that Lysandis preferred the face and form of another woman. She then draws an interesting comparison. Minisera's loyalty to Lysandis is almost as great as his foolish loyalty to the Emperor. This confirms that, at the very least, Daggerfall's obedience to the Empire will not last much longer. She then goes on to express some unexpected sympathy for the orcs, and those poor little children. How dreadful the butchery of the innocents. We know the barbarism of the orcs, but surely they did not deserve that. And with that, we can take our leave of Daggerfall and return to the court of Wayrest, where we previously helped Morgaya. Here, Prince Helseth needs a courier, but not an ordinary one. He has a letter of utmost importance for a high dignitary. In return for our services, he's willing to put in a good word for us with the King and Queen of Wayrest, as well as give us some information on what he calls the affair with Daggerfall. What exactly he's referring to, the letter or the late king, is unclear. In any case, it seems promising. We wait 24 hours and speak with Helseth again when he'll give us a letter. This letter is somewhat unique. Most of the time when you read a message, the game doesn't really care or notice in any way. In this case, however, reading the message results in a direct loss of reputation with both affected parties. The contents of the letter is blackmail, written to subtly imply that the good Prince Helseth wants nothing more than to help his friend, Lord Castellan. Basically, Castellan's sister's latest jewelry and clothing are too expensive for her husband to have purchased for her, which has led to, as Helseth calls it, distasteful conjecture. Castellan's being accused of taking money from the royal treasury to support his sister's expensive tastes. Now, this could very well be scandalous on its own, but I believe the distasteful conjecture Helseth refers to is that of an incestuous relationship. Of course, Helseth doesn't think so. He is convinced of his integrity as a senior member of the Elder Council. If only he could help his poor friend in need. Yeah, like I said, it's blackmail. Whether Castellan is porking her sister or not is irrelevant. People think he is, and there's enough circumstantial evidence that Helseth is using it to get a leg up in the political realm. What an industrious and forward-thinking young man. Anyways, we deliver the letter. Castellan seems nervous about its contents, and then we're given a response letter that simply says they'll meet soon. His life probably couldn't get any worse right now. Once we deliver Castellan's response, Helseth gives us the skinny on the situation in Daggerfall. He says his family may have more to do with it than most people know. Apparently, Wayrest had sent advisors to try and stop the war on the night that Lysandis and Cameron had died. He says that Lysandis was disgustingly loyal to the Emperor, where Cameron was fighting for more autonomy. So far, this tracks with what we know of the Battle of Creegane Field. The Emperor had called Lysandis a loyal subject and friend, after all. King Cameron is a new name for us, however. King Cameron is the late King of Sentinel. It's not stated outright in any of the quests we've done so far, and we've focused quite a bit on King Lysandis because he's the one still haunting his city. Cameron was also slain on the eve of the Battle of Creegane, the same night as his rival. Helseth tells us that apparently the advisors arrived too late because they were waylaid by the orcs of Gortwag, but there are stories of advisors making it to Lysandis' tent and having a brief conversation with him. He promises to update us if he receives any more information, but I wouldn't hold my breath. Still, he's given us some useful information. Now we know that while Sentinel and Daggerfall were at war, the court of Wayrest was up to something. It shouldn't take a genius to put together that the court who literally just sent us to blackmail a noble isn't the most noble or honest of royal courts. Whatever they're up to, we need to find out what it is. After this, we have to spend a little bit of time leveling up, and eventually we receive a letter. Prince Lotan of Sentinel claims to be able to shed some light upon recent events. His father and King Lysandis were somewhat close, apparently. I don't know if this is his sick idea of a joke, but it's kind of funny that he speaks of warring kings like that. We're going to put his letter on the back burner for now while we continue our investigation into Daggerfall. We take the advice that Princess Morgaya offered a while back and try speaking to someone of a lower station. This leads to us speaking with the cook, Sindasa. Sindasa claims to have some information on the Emperor's letter, but only if we scratch her back first. Apparently, she needs a werewolf killed. Now, this story is mostly self-contained and doesn't relate to the overall conflict in the region, but I do think that it's somewhat novel. While at Tristor Laboratory, we can come across some diary entries from the werewolf in question. It appears that Sindasa sent her brother to the shapeshifters after he broke up with her friend. He assumes that they parted amicably, and doing this quest peacefully would confirm as much. He suspects that she's learning bad things in the court of Daggerfall. Unfortunately, doing the quest peacefully isn't possible in the vanilla version of the game, so I slew the poor man and returned to Daggerfall for the promised information. Sindasa regales us with a tale of how she had received a letter addressed to the Queen of Daggerfall, and dutifully handed it to Aubk-i. Aubk-i, who initially seemed excited by the prospect of a letter from the Emperor, seemed shocked by the contents before saying it was intended for Minnesera. To be so shocked over a personal and sentimental letter raises some questions. Was Minnesera also an adulterer with the Emperor? Is he so dirty as to send her a list of the things he wants to do to her? We don't know yet. Aubk-i assured Sindasa that she would deliver the letter to Minnesera and not to worry about it. We know that Aubk-i doesn't think highly of the Emperor, and it's safe to assume that her husband feels much the same. A dirty letter would probably only add fuel to the fire. With that, it's time for us to pack our bags and go to Sentinel. We're going to assist Prince Lotan with whatever it is that he needs. We've learned quite a bit more about the letter than we have about Lysandis' death so far, so hopefully Lotan can fill us in a bit more than everyone else has. In exchange, he wants us to investigate what happened to his older brother. Apparently, whenever he asks people, they keep giving him different answers, ranging from dying of illness to being kidnapped by the Underking. He wants us to find out, definitively, what happened. This shouldn't be too hard, right? So we set out to find out about him. Now, I decided to ask some of the random civilians about the late prince, and found out some rather interesting things. He was the only prince to never receive a public funeral, and he apparently liked books more than swords, much to the displeasure of King Cameron. It's not too long after we accept Lotan's mission before we receive an unsigned note saying that if we want to know the truth, we have to meet someone at a given location. When we do meet this person, he seems somewhat paranoid, telling us he'd rather nobody see us talking. He doesn't tell us anything about himself, but maybe we can glean some information from this dialogue. He tells us, "It has come to our attention that the Underking is being wrongly accused of abducting the prince." This is interesting. We don't know a whole lot about the Underking at the moment. In fact, this is the first time he's been mentioned in the whole video. Make no mistake though, the Underking is an extremely important figure. He's the guy on the cover of the box after all. We'll learn more about him later, but for now, all we can really tell is that he has some loyal underlings and is at least somewhat concerned with clearing his name. We're told to check into Castle Phaelum this time, but it's worth noting that this quest can also take us to a place called the Fortress of Fojum. Both are in the northern part of Sentinel, but ultimately the quest itself is identical. After we fight through the dungeon, we eventually find an historic document. It's rather long-winded, and I'll give you a few seconds if you want to pause and read it for yourself, but the gist of it is this. The prince, age 15 at the time of writing, has been ill for most of his life. His parents, embarrassed that their eldest son and crown prince would be plagued so, had him kidnapped and thrown into this dungeon and left to die. He briefly laments having studied history and science instead of magic, as then he might be able to free himself. The story is pretty sad and speaks to the brutality of the Sentinel nobility. He speaks briefly of his younger sister, Aubk-i. I think this is an interesting development, given that she's currently the Queen of Daggerfall. Now, if you're confused by this, it'll be explained very shortly. The death certificate also sheds some light on the Underking. Allegedly, he had placed his life force in the body of a powerful being, and had used it to conquer Tamriel a long time ago. This is a somewhat important piece of lore, but isn't relevant to our investigation. We return to Prince Lotan and tell him the sad news of his brother's passing. His fears have been confirmed, but he does fulfill his promise to tell us something of note. The first thing he tells us is that Lysandis was in love with his court sorceress, one Medora Direni. and it was during the War of Bethany that Minnesera discovered this. While Lysandis was away, she banished Medora from the court. This is corroborated by those letters that Minnesera had been trying to dispose of. Lotan explains that even though Aubk-i is queen, Minnesera still lives at Castle Daggerfall. Aubk-i's marriage to Gothrid is a part of the peace treaty between the two nations. After the War of Bethany, oh, by the way, that's this island here, where the werewolf was, both Daggerfall and Sentinel had lost their kings. Marrying the new king of Daggerfall and the princess of Sentinel is a way of trying to patch things up between them. Ultimately, it's not super important in the context of the story, but it's worth noting for one simple reason. Uriel Septim VII has no allies in High Rock anymore. All three of the major powers in the region have anti-imperial sentiment. Sentinel still wants more autonomy, and Aubk-i being the Queen of Daggerfall means that she has a lot of political sway not only with the region overall, but with her husband, King Gothrid. And we've already spoken with two of the nobles in Wayrest, who have both shown disdain for the Empire. As an agent of the Blades and loyal subject of the Empire, you have no political allies in Daggerfall. That means that things are going to get complicated. Lotan tells us that Medora has an enormous castle on the Isle of Balfiera, and that there's a curse that stops her from leaving. He thanks us again, and tells us that his heart is at ease now that he knows the truth. Now, we'll be visiting Medora later, but if we go now, she's just going to tell us that we need to be stronger before she's willing to give us the next quest. So we're going to visit Wayrest again. We're going to speak to Elisana. When we do, she introduces herself as King Edwyr's child and heir apparent to Wayrest. She also looks a little different from Morgaya and Helsith, and this isn't for no reason. Elisana is King Edwyr's only child. Helsith and Morgaya are his stepchildren that only came to Wayrest after his marriage to the one, the only, Queen Barenziah. Now, if you're familiar with Elder Scrolls lore books, you probably know at least a little bit about Barenziah. Even if you've only played Skyrim, you probably remember the Stones of Barenziah. Barenziah, more than anybody, has reason to distrust and dislike the Empire. But this quest isn't about Barenziah, so let me refocus. Elisana has a simple quest for us. She needs us to help her with an embarrassing predicament. A senior member of the Elder Council, Lord Castellian, left court on holiday and she forgot to return a cloak. What a ditz, right? No problem, Elisana. It's no bother, really. We help the girl out and agree to deliver the cloak. How frightfully nice of you to help a silly girl like myself. Gosh, she's just so silly. We take the cloak to Lord Castellian, and the literal instant he puts it on, he's killed. The guards are on our asses, and we're being called an assassin. It's not long before we're confronted with Daedra seducers, who tell us that they've come to claim Lord Castellian. We, apparently, have delivered his funeral shroud. Now we can either book it, or we can fight it out. Either way, we return to Princess Elisana. I hope Lord Castellian appreciates the extra work I put into the robe. It's a real attention-getter now. If it's not painfully obvious, Elisana's ditzy girl persona is a total act. She's used us to assassinate Lord Castellian, the man that Helsith was blackmailing. If you're confused by why she'd undermine her brother's efforts, let me spell it out for you. It's a battle for succession over who will ascend the throne of Wayrest. Barenziah's children, as they don't have any blood relation to King Edwyr, don't have a legitimate claim to the throne. But we don't care about petty noble rivalries. Whoever sits on the throne doesn't affect us so much. Elisana, however, goes above and beyond. In addition to our agreed-upon payment, she tells us something much more interesting. Her father is apparently interested in a relic called the Totem of Tiber Septim, and has spies all over looking for it. When they find it, he's going to need someone to secure it, and she promises to give him our name when that happens. Now, what exactly the Totem of Tiber Septim isn't known to us at the moment, but will become extremely important later on. With all that done, we're going to finally try and speak with Minnesera. Minnesera has apparently heard about us, and now when we talk to her, she tells us that apparently Aubk-i never gave her the letter that was supposedly addressed to her. She wants us to investigate the matter, but apparently poking into Aubk-i's affairs might enrage her son, the king. Minnesera questions Aubk-i's loyalty to the Emperor, something that we've been doing ourselves, and explains that she's the daughter of King Cameron. All stuff that we're aware of so far. Lysandis' body was apparently never recovered after the Battle of Creegane Field, so instead of a tomb, a memorial was erected. She wants us to find out why a letter addressed to her was given to Aubk-i instead. We're given the name of the Emperor's messenger in Daggerfall, as well as instructions to find them. First, we're going to need to find their boss, who has the messenger's schedule, so that we can meet them somewhere on their route. Finding our messenger's boss isn't hard, but we're warned that the last person who ambushed the messenger was disemboweled. Apparently, it'll be some time before they arrive in the town that we're told of. This isn't a big deal, we just wait around until they eventually show up and then speak to them. Finally finding our messenger, she greets us with a warning. I get that being a courier is pretty dangerous, but my name's not Benny, so you don't have anything to fear from me. The messenger explains that they had a letter addressed to the Queen of Daggerfall. If they're not mistaken, Aubk-i is the Queen of Daggerfall, not Minnesera. The courier takes offense at the idea that they might knowingly make a delivery to the wrong person. They give us an item to show to Minnesera as proof that they are loyal and faithful. So that leaves us with a bit of a question, with a simple answer. We return to Minnesera, who puts the pieces together for us. The letter was addressed to the Queen of Daggerfall, but was sent before Lysandis' passing, when Minnesera was still the queen. By the time the letter had arrived, however, Lysandis was dead and Gothred was king, making Aubk-i the queen. Minnesera expresses her distrust of Aubk-i and is suddenly very invested in finding out what the contents of that letter was. Guys, I'm starting to suspect that this letter isn't just Uriel being a freak. She tells us that she received a letter from Morgaia, and notes, now there is a family that seethes under the rule of the Emperor. She tells us to return if we find out who currently has the letter. Luckily for us, we already know. Speaking to Minnesera again, she tells us she might have a way to get Gortwog to hand over the letter. Apparently, Gortwog wants to be recognized by the Empire, because it would mean the beginning of peace between the orcs and the other races. If we present him with the letter that Minnesera provides, it should persuade him. She points us to Orsinium, and we're finally off to put this letter to rest. Her letter to Gortwog kindly asks him to return the letter. In exchange, she promises to forward his claim to sovereign rule to the Emperor. Gortwog is seemingly unimpressed at this. He tells us that we can have the letter, but his people may not be so lenient toward our wandering the halls of Orsinium. If we can find a letter and survive, he will consider us to be worthy. We fight through the dungeon and eventually find the letter. Guys, I don't think this letter is of a personal, sentimental nature. This letter is a bombshell in terms of what it means for the story. Let's go over the contents of this letter. The totem of Tiber Septim has been found. You know what this means. The power behind Tiber Septim could be unleashed upon Tamriel again. Rumor has it that Lord Woodbourne, a minor lord of Wayrest, has possession of it. He will doubtless lose it soon. You must persuade him to hand it over to you or Lady Brisienna. The court of Wayrest has no love of King Lysandis, but you still have influence there. I am asking you to use it on my behalf. The totem is an artifact that we know the King of Wayrest is looking for, but why is that important? If you've ever been curious about how one man could conquer all of Tamriel, the secret lies in having a capacity to commit overwhelming violence. The totem is the key to control this supposed power. What exactly it is, or how it works, is a mystery to us, but we do know that in the hands of any of the major powers of the Iliac Bay, it will spell disaster for the Empire. Remember, this letter was sent long before the agent was sent to Daggerfall. Minnesera tells us that this letter is dangerous and that it's likely everyone knows at this point. Everyone in the Iliac Bay is scrambling to be the first to find it, and if they do, there's a good chance that they will use its power to crush their enemies. This is all extremely important information, and also tells us something else. Uriel Septim VII, our supposed friend, lied to us about the importance of the letter. If you recall, he specifically says that the letter is the lesser request, and that it is of a sentimental nature. Actually seeing the letter, however, we can see why he would ask that we destroy it. Not only does it threaten his rule, it threatens destruction on a scale not seen since the end of the Second Era 400 years ago. With that, Minisera sends us off and tells us she's sure the totem will find itself in our life somehow. You seem to have a knack for such things. As we leave, we receive a number of letters from different people. The first letter we get is a warning to stop investigating the death of Lysandis. Apparently, we're poking into someone's personal affairs. We're being watched. How cute. Next is from a friend. This is a huge lore dump. I'm going to try to summarize it for you, but if you want to read the details, feel free to pause. Tiber Septim's secret weapon for conquering Tamriel was Numidium, a 1,000-foot-tall automaton. It's powered by a gem called the Mantella, which was infused with the life force of Tiber Septim's Imperial Battle Mage. The Battle Mage was apparently unhappy about the use of Numidium and fought to reclaim the Mantella. The enormous golem's body was shattered and spread throughout the entirety of Tamriel, and the Battle Mage went dormant in an underground vault. The Battle Mage became known as the Underking, and currently seeks the Mantella. The Blades, meanwhile, collected the pieces of Numidium. The totem of Tiber Septim is the mechanism that Tiber Septim used to control Numidium. This lore dump mostly serves to urge the agent to haste and explain why the totem specifically is so important to find. So the mystery of what happened to the letter is solved, but now we've got a new major quest, that being to find the totem itself and return it to the Emperor. As we travel, we're eventually accosted by a zombie with a letter on it from Mannimarco. The King of Worms claims to have a task that is well suited to us. We, of course, will jump at anything that might help at this point. So, we return to his crypt in Skurg Barrow and go to see what the deal is. Apparently, the task he has in mind will take us into the bowels of Castle Sentinel. The reward is knowledge that only the dead can provide. An interesting proposition. We're to bring him the ghost of Prince Carolus, the great-grandfather of the late King Cameron, who is now a lich locked away deep inside the castle. If we complete this task for him, Mannimarco promises a tale few mortals have heard. So we set to work. As luck would have it, on our way over to Castle Sentinel, we receive a message from Queen Akarithi. Our presence is desired. Loten has recommended us with high praise. She wants us to steal a painting from Castle Wayrest. How funny that we get 2 missions to infiltrate major powers one after another. We of course accept, but first we have some business to attend to right here. This is the first of the castle dungeons. In case you're unaware, each of the 3 major powers' castles doubles as a dungeon. Castle Sentinel, Castle Daggerfall, and Castle Wayrest. Because the entirety of each area is considered a dungeon, you're actually able to sleep inside of them for free, as though you weren't in town. Neat little trick if you somehow can't afford to pay 5 gold for an inn. Finding our way to Prince Carolus isn't too hard, but he is protected by this lever puzzle. Opening the way to him puts us into our first mandatory fight with a lich. Liches are scary, of course, but totally beatable at pretty much any level. They're very powerful spellcasters, but they also have a habit of damaging themselves with their fireballs, which softens them up considerably. Failing that, however, strafing around them can help somewhat. Just be careful if you're running a class with low hit points. Defeating the lich puts his soul into the magical scarab provided by Mannimarco, meaning that we're prepared to return to Skurg Barrow. When we do, Mannimarco tells us that it's time for someone outside of Tiber Septim's line to know the truth about the Underking. The main thing that we learn here is the Underking's name, Zurin Arctis. Mannimarco says that Tiber Septim betrayed Zurin, and that when the Battle Mage died, his soul refused to leave his body. Ever since, he's lived on as the Underking. Mannimarco warns us that if the Underking regains his mortal body, he would throw all of Tamriel into conflict. Now, Manny's warning aside, this is somewhat interesting. If you'll recall, not too long ago we talked about how the Battle Mage, who we now know is named Zurin, was the one who was unhappy about Numidium's use. In our friend's letter, Zurin seems to be the aggressor, but Mannimarco's story seems to imply that this was reversed. Elder Scrolls is known for having biased and unreliable narrators, so who do you trust? We'll think about that while we acquiesce to Akarithi's request. We make our way to Wayrest and break into the dungeon. There's not much significant within except for our objective, the painting. This isn't just any ordinary painting, however. It's a magical painting that moves. It describes a scene wherein men from Wayrest are arguing with a man from Daggerfall. One of the Wayrest men slips behind him and stabs him with a dagger. So let's put a few more clues together, shall we? If you'll recall, way back when we helped Prince Helseth, he told us that some advisors from Wayrest were sent to Daggerfall prior to the battle at Cregain Field. We also have seen the treachery that seems to be the order of the day in Wayrest, where every quest from them seems to involve some kind of ulterior motive or hidden agenda. We've also experienced firsthand their willingness not only to assassinate threats, but to use unwitting, unknowing mercenaries to do so. It doesn't seem an insane leap of logic to say that Wayrest assassinated King Lysandis, does it? But hold on. The man bearing the coat of arms of Daggerfall was assassinated. Lysandis died honorably on the field of battle. This is probably someone else. Someone unaccounted for, surely. What's going on? We're left to think about what this could mean as we return the painting to Queen Akarithi. As soon as we receive our payment, she asks us whether or not we looked at the painting. If we tell her we didn't, we gain slightly more reputation than if we tell her we did, but the answer here doesn't make a huge difference or anything. In our travels, we eventually receive yet another letter. The agent has gained a reputation as able, brave, and unprejudiced. Queen Akarithi has described us as a hero. The letter claims to be from an agent of the Underking, and they want our help. Durin Arctis needs our help? We're his top guy? We find the agent and hear them out. Apparently, they're surprised to see us. The Underking needs our help against the Necromancers. We're promised some information we won't be able to find elsewhere in exchange. The Necromancers have taken an item from the Underking, cursed it, and given it to the Blades. The agent explains that the Blades were once the honor guard of Tiber Septim. Today, they are loyal to the Empire and Tiber's code, but not always to the current Emperor. The Underking has reason to not wish harm upon the Blades. As we go to complete the quest, we consider some things. The fact that the Underking is undermining the efforts of the Necromancers to harm the Blades puts these two factions into direct opposition with one another. If Mannimarco claims that Tiber Septim betrayed Zurin Arctis, then why does Zurin work to protect his betrayer's honor guard? We steal away with the cursed item and return to the agent. When we return, the agent of the Underking uncurses the item and allows us to keep it. Then our suspicions are confirmed. King Lysandis did not die in the Battle of Cregain. He was slain by treachery before it. Between this and the painting we retrieved for Akarithi, it's not hard to figure out who's responsible. The reason Lysandis' body was never recovered is because the remains were secretly taken to a tomb in Menevia. The agent doesn't know who betrayed Lysandis, nor why his spirit haunts the city of Daggerfall and not the battlefield of Cregain. Finally, a quest with some answers! But now we're at a loss again. We know Lysandis was assassinated by advisors sent from Wayrest, and we know that there's someone named Lord Woodbourne in Wayrest who supposedly has the totem. But that's as far as we get. It's time to pay Medora a visit. As Lysandis' mistress, maybe she's able to help us find a way to put the late king to rest. Medora is a bit different from other quest givers that we've run into up until now. Medora is deep inside of Direni Tower. The path to her is long and dangerous. When we finally meet her, she agrees to help. She has an interest in exorcising the spirit of King Lysandis, but tells us that we need to lift the curse on Direni Tower, and she needs our help for that. We agree and get the details of our little quest. Nulfaga, Lysandis' mother, the madwoman we met in Shedungent, is apparently a renowned mystic. Medora tells us that she needs a great unicorn horn to break the curse. Being locked away in a tower, she's not sure whether the rumors of her madness are true or not. We, however, are well aware of it, having provided the current queen with her health report ourselves. It's a bit of a journey to Shedungent and back, but not that much in terms of actual dungeoning. We find the great unicorn horn and return to Medora without much pain. She hopes she can count on us for future aid, but for now she doesn't have anything more for us, so we're once again left without a lead. When we return to a city, another letter finds its way into our hands. This one comes from Queen Brisienna of Wayrest. At this point, we know Wayrest is responsible for the death of King Lysandis, but we don't know specifically who. In any case, refusing a royal's invitation, especially from a court as openly murderous as Wayrest, is about as likely to kill us as accepting it is, so we might as well see what the Queen wants, especially since we apparently have a mutual interest, whatever that might be. When responding to her letter, Brisienna is, as ever, polite and cordial. She wants our help to correct some wayward revolutionaries. Whatever could this mean? She tells us that a disgruntled, possibly deranged scribe wrote a biography that she calls cruel and defamatory. The book is also excessively critical of the Empire and the Septim family. She tells us that it was suppressed and that the author was executed, but apparently chapters of the book will resurface now and then. The orcs apparently have one, and are attempting to publish it. Brisienna wants us to remove it from Orsinium. Once the chapter is safe, we will talk further about your ambitions. Now, anybody familiar with Brisienna knows about her two biographies. The first, officially endorsed one, is the biography of Queen Brisienna, a fairly normal 3-volume summary of events that concern Brisienna. The second one, that the quest concerns, is known as the real Brisienna. It is much more inflammatory, and you'll hopefully understand why shortly. We make our way to Orsinium again, and when we find the chapter of the book that Brisienna wants suppressed, it's no mystery why she wouldn't want this everywhere. It's available online if you want to read it yourself. It's somewhat lengthy, but the long and short of it is this. Tiber Septim impregnated Brisienna, and when he found out, forcibly aborted the child. If this story is true, it's no wonder that the Empire would attempt to censor it. It does, however, beg the question, why would Brisienna, the sympathetic victim of the story, want to censor it? Especially since it would make her aggressor, the founder of the Empire, look almost comically evil. Recall that it was an assassin from Wayrest who killed King Lysandis, after all. If the story is true, then it makes perfect sense for Brisienna to hold a grudge. In the chapter we read, the healer says that elven women never bear more than 4 children, and most only get as many as 2. If I take this one from her, she may never conceive again. We know she has 2 children in Morgaia and Helseth. Could it be that the real Brisienna is actually libelous? Perhaps Brisienna still likes the Emperor despite whatever parting she had from Tiber. Here's an interesting idea. Are King Edwyr and Queen Brisienna operating independently of one another? Either way, Brisienna appreciates our work and rewards us by providing information that we, unfortunately, already know. Gortwog is the holder of the letter, and is contending for the totem of Tiber Septim. As fascinating as this quest is, it unfortunately doesn't provide us with any answers regarding our main objectives. It's not too long after this that we're visited by a vision from Medora. She tells us of a powder that can soothe the ghost of Lysandis, but Gortwog is the one who has it. She tells us to see if we can persuade him to give it to us. Speaking with Gortwog, he tells us where we can find it. He does this because he respects the memory of King Lysandis, and his price is that Medora must support his claim to the heart. He says that she will understand what that means. We haven't heard of anything described as a heart so far, so this may be a new artifact of some sort, but may also be a different name for something that we've heard of already. We go to the dungeon described by Gortwog, and eventually find a mummy that has the dust of restful death held in some paper that was used to write a letter. The letter is from Gortwog to Medora, and pleads for assistance. Gortwog says that If the Empire finds out I have attacked royal advisors of Wayrest, even if they are assassins, my people will never win the same status and respect as the Khajiit and Argonians. This is quite an interesting development. It seems that Gortwog knew Wayrest had sent assassins after Lysandis, and acted to protect him. Unfortunately, their attack failed to stop the assassins. This attack is also corroborated by Helseth's story. We take the dust and Gortwog's message back to Medora. Medora tells us that she never got that letter. Unsurprising, given that we found it being used to hold magical dust on a mummy in a dungeon. Gortwog and his orcs are not the villains most people see them as. Medora says that Edwyr has never been particularly loyal to the Empire, and swears to have her revenge on him. She needs a month to prepare the dust, which we will happily give her. Once the powder is ready, she tells us that all we need to do is sprinkle it on his corpse. It will allow us to speak to Lysandis and find out what we can do to help him pass on. She tells us that she doesn't know where he was buried. Luckily for us, we know about the tomb in Menevia. It takes a little bit of time, but eventually we find our way to the late king's body and get the following cutscene.
I do not seek to be placated. I seek vengeance upon he who slew me. If you would truly lay my spirit to rest, be the instrument of my vengeance against Lord Woodborn of Wayrest.
Lysandis spells it out for us. He wants us to deal with Lord Woodborn of Wayrest. Note that he doesn't necessarily care if we kill him or not, simply that we're to be the instrument of his vengeance. This is because there are two ways to complete this quest. The simplest is just to find Lord Woodborn at his manor, Woodborn Hall, and kill him. Doing this, he will admit to killing Lysandis, and with his dying breath, he will say, "It's up to Gothrid now." Alternatively, you can find his journal, which has incriminating information, and deliver it to one of a few different parties. Not all of the parties that will accept the journal will complete the quest, however. You can give the diary to Queen Akarethi, Gortwog, or Mannimarco, but they cannot or will not move against Woodborn. The absolute worst option, however, is to give evidence of Woodborn's treason to his own son, King Gothrid, or his wife, Aubk-i. Doing that will not only not complete the quest, but will get them to sick the guards on you. If you want to complete the quest in this manner, the obvious options would be Minisera, Nulfaga, or Medora. They are direct loved ones of Lysandis who still have the power to act against Lord Woodborn. They all exclaim that justice will come by their hand, and warn us to steer clear of Woodborn Hall for a while. Baron Zaya, Edwyr, and Helseth will also take action against Woodborn, surprisingly enough. The exclamation that they give when provided with the information is quite a lot. They swear to jail and execute him, bar his name from the books of honor, and have his fortune confiscated. These are all the options that will complete the quest and lay Lysandis to rest. This is really fascinating to me because the Court of Wayrest are the ones that are most suspicious throughout this entire endeavor. Perhaps the reaction is so over the top because they're trying to scapegoat Woodborn? Regardless, we've laid Lysandis' soul to rest and brought peace back to Daggerfall.
King Lysandis is at last able to rest. The wraiths and ghosts of his loyal soldiers vanish as the soul passes to the underworld, leaving the city of Daggerfall to the living.
There is still the matter of the totem, but we are able to walk around Daggerfall City at night without being accosted by a legion of ghosts. Eventually, however, we get another letter. The fate of the Empire could be at stake. We have to meet up with Brisienna once more. Brisienna explains to us that the Blades have mounted an assault on Woodborn Hall, but the totem is gone. She has reason to believe that Gothrid has it, and she needs our help to infiltrate Castle Daggerfall and retrieve it. We don't have much choice but to accept. The totem is in a vault with quite the elaborate security system. First, the vault must be lowered by touching this wheel. Doing this, however, seemingly makes getting out of the pit below impossible. Touching this chain will teleport you up above. The left one will also teleport you above, but if you don't have a levitation spell or something, your landing is going to be hard. Then we simply pull this lever and open the section of the vault that the totem is housed in. Successfully grabbing the totem and escaping the castle, we hear a voice. "You are my new host. Know this now and resolutely. You are not worthy to carry the totem of Tiber Septim. Only those of his bloodline may carry me. I will give you a year and a day to accomplish this. Failing to deliver the totem will kill the agent. Other than that, however, we're free to deliver the totem to whomsoever we believe to be worthy of it. We have 7 potential candidates: Aubk-i, Edwir, Gortwog, Gothrid, Mannimarco, Zurin, or Uriel. Each and every one of them will send us a letter, pleading their case and all but begging us to deliver the totem to them. They each offer different rewards, from mountains of gold to magical artifacts to fame. This playthrough, however, we're a loyal agent of the Blades, and are going to be delivering the totem to Brisienna to give to Uriel Septim. Doing so, she tells us that the totem could have started a civil war in the wrong hands. She says now we have to meet with Nulfaga, as she holds the key to the Mantella. Free the Mantella, and the Emperor controls Great Numidium through the totem. When we meet Nulfaga, she says that we have chosen who will command Great Numidium, and that we shall bear the burden for the consequences. She sends the agent to the Mantellan Crux, the safeguarded prison of the Mantella. Merely touching the large green jewel is all that is necessary to free it and be transported back to Nulfaga's side. Inside the Mantellan Crux, it should be no surprise that the agent succeeds in his quest, battling Daedra, Undead, and Atronox, running into the mad god Shegaroth more than once, and finally claiming the Mantella. As he's transported back to Mundus, Nulfaga invites him to look upon the Book of Time, and read fate as it shall be recorded upon the Elder Scrolls.
Great Numidium, its raw power tempered only by the blades, crushes all of the rebellious children of the Empire, destroying their armies.
Of course, this event doesn't just happen as we see it here. Anyone savvy with Elder Scrolls lore knows that all of the contradictory endings of Daggerfall happen simultaneously as part of a dragon break. I hope, however, that you've appreciated this summary of events of how the West was warped. Big thanks to everybody for watching. This video took a lot more work than I initially anticipated, and between that, some minor mouse and keyboard issues, and the release of Oblivion Remastered, it was delayed by a full week. I noticed that there were some complaints about audio issues in the past, and I'm hoping that I've resolved them for this video. Again, I hope you liked it, and if you did, I'd appreciate you leaving a like. I'll be back soon with some more Daggerfall. Holy shit, it's 19 pages long.